Library's online celebration of Black History. We are honored to have Reverend Cradle with us today. As we celebrate Black history, we want to learn more about local Black history. I asked the leader of the Toms River Area NAACP, Bahia Abdullah, who would be a good civil rights leader to interview locally, and she said we should speak to you, Reverend Cradle. Okay, if you are not familiar with Reverend Cradle, he's not only a reverend, he's in his 6th term on the South Toms River Council, and he's spent 59 years in South Toms River. So without further ado, Reverend Cradle.
Glad to meet you.
Thank you. So, where were you born?
I was born in Richmond, Virginia, some 65 years ago. I was raised, first part of my life, first 6 years of my life, small town 80 miles south of Richmond, Kinbridge, Virginia. Moved to New Jersey when I was 6 years old, South Toms River.
And you've been in South Toms River ever since?
Yes, I've been in South Toms River, pretty much the same location. We built the house that I now live in 62, and I've been there ever since then. It's 51 years now.
So could you talk a little bit about what South Toms River was like?
South Toms River, the community that I grew up in, a lot different than it is right now. It was a community that people knew each other. Most of the people in the community had been long-term residents of the community. Everyone knew everyone. We could go outside, and our parents were assured that the neighbor down the street was looking out for us. You like to always hear that it takes a village to raise a child, and we had a village in South Toms River. And I enjoyed it because not only would your neighbor reprimand you and not have to worry about what your parents were saying, but when you did something good, they would also pat you on the back. So we had that community support. And unfortunately, that is not the case anymore. We have a very transient community now. In a neighborhood about 15 houses, only 2 of the houses are long-term residents. That's myself and the Harveys down the end of the street.
Well, you have been taking a recent interest in genealogy.
Yes, I have. It's something I started with my family when I started going to our family reunions 20 years ago to get to know who my family were, my ancestors were. And I was able to trace that back to the middle 1800s. But then I got involved in the genealogy of South Toms River. And I've been able to connect most of the families that have been in South Toms River for any length of time, the African American families that have been in South Toms River for any length of time. We're all connected through marriage by one way or another. With the birth of 2 of my grandchildren, my family is connected to everyone in South Toms River, every African American in South Toms River that's been there any length of time. And a lot of families that have been there for a while. My family, the Worthies, the Harveys, the Mosleys, the Hesters, and the Mercers have been there for quite a while, and we're all connected. I first started doing this. I knew why my family came to South Toms River. I knew how we got there. I was wondering how the other families got to South Toms River. It's very interesting. When I started interviewing people early 90s, 91, 92, of why they came to South Toms River, and it's just snowballed from there. And people understand that I am really involved in the history, and they start bringing me their pictures. I got at least 5,000 pictures of the families in South Toms River.
So I'll bring this up now. You have a Facebook page for South Toms River History?
Yes, I have on Facebook. It's South Toms River Historical Society. I started a couple months ago, and I've gotten good reception. There's one particular young man, he's younger than me. He lives in Florida now, but he saw the site, and he sent me quite a few pictures of our area because he grew up in our area, although he no longer lives here. And a lot of pictures that I did not have. and he shares them with me. We go back and forth. I look forward to meeting him when he comes up here.
So let's move away from South Toms River and put the focus back on you. You had attended Toms River High School. How many high schools were there when you attended high school?
When I attended Toms River was the only high school. What is now South was the only high school, and St. Joe's, which is now Mondonovan, I think. Those were only two schools around. I graduated high school in 1966. I had a graduating class of 600. Played football and wrestled for South, Toms River. I'll never forget that. It was interesting for me, for football especially, for both. Signorino, who I now understand is helping his son with the football team, came to Toms River. We had 2 years, I think we had one win. Within 5 or 6 years, Toms River were state champs. Coach Ron Signorino Sr. changed that around. And our wrestling team was just as successful. Our JV had never been beaten, and our varsity had a 42-meet win streak.
So you would go to wrestling practice, then head on to the Acme for your job.
Yes, sir.
Head home all on foot.
Yes, at that time, because I lived just under what was a mile from South Toms River, I walked, and I enjoyed walking. And because we had sports afterwards, there were no late buses back then. So you walked home when you got a ride from someone if you lived a ways off, because I was so close. I walked after wrestling practice, football practice. I would go over to the Acme supermarket that's located right in the shopping center where Kohl's is now. And I worked there for 3 years while I was in high school. And then I'd walk back home afterwards. But it was a safe town then. It was a safe town. Even as a 14, 15-year-old, my parents felt comfortable with me being out there walking. Because not only, like I say, not only were your parents watching out for you, but the community was watching out for you. Little different now, but it's a good time to grow up in this area.
So when you graduated, you had said you were one of 3 African-American students in your graduating class.
Yes, I was graduating class 600. I was the only African-American male. There were 2 females out of the whole class. So when I graduated, and I'll thank her, I thanked her on numerous occasions since then, my guidance counselor, Mrs. Gatfield, she brought a book to me. She says, Oscar, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. She said, but maybe you'll be interested in these schools. She had a booklet on historically black colleges. And I appreciate her for giving me that book, because that was something I terribly needed at that time. I went to Hampton Institute, which is now Hampton University, 66 to 70, and I was in culture shock.
Why?
It was totally so different from being here in Ocean County, Toms River area, and being down there. For example, in our student union building, there was a big mural. I mean, it was a 30 by 40 foot mural in our student center with famous African Americans on the picture, on the mural. My roommate was a freshman from Texas, 16 years old. He had to tell me, except for George Washington Carver and Frederick Douglass, I did not know the rest of the people on that mural. Having gone to a school that was equally mixed, white and black, he got a black history education. He knew everyone that was on that wall, and he taught me those things. I was able to learn about my culture being there at Hampton. And being at Hampton in the 60s, as I said, it was 66 to 70. It was an awesome time. I got to meet one of the greatest moments I had. Muhammad Ali was one of my idols since he came out of the Olympics. And I got to meet him, shake his hand, stand right next to him at Hampton. He was doing the college tour at the time. They suspended his license. And he was just an awesome person. I mean, the magnetism of Muhammad Ali. And that was one of my high points, just one of the many. English class, Stokely Carmichael, one of the leaders of SNCC, H. Rap Brown. Stokely Carmichael, I think he had a thing for my English teacher, and he'd show up in English class whenever he felt like it. I think it was mutual. So those days that he showed up, we didn't do very much English. We were talking about where you've been, what's going on in the movement, what's up now, and he loved to talk to us about the movement and what was going on. I was there April '68 when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and that day Ogden Hall, which is our main auditorium, we gathered there. We were all in shock. Everybody's there in shock. And someone, I'm not sure who, formed a march. Let's do a march through town, the town of Hampton. And so we did. And what amazed me, blew my mind, the store owners, as we marched through town, would close their stores and came out and marched with us. And these were mostly white store owners, but they came out and marched with us. It was such an inspiring day, considering what had happened that day, the night before actually. Considering what had happened, it was such an inspiring day.
So you graduate, and you are inspired. So could you describe your involvement in the civil rights movement?
Today, I'm a member of the NAACP. I am on the executive committee. Have been since '83, when I returned from New Mexico. And I grew up, thankfully, in a family that believed in serving not only your family, but your community as well. So whatever I can do to make someone's life a little bit better, I do that. I pastor a church in Jackson. I was raised in Wells Chapel AME Church since I was a child. When I got to be 18, my brain went out to lunch for a few years before. So it was a few years before I returned, but when I did return, I went back to Wells Chapel, stayed there until 2009, and I was sent to Jackson, a sister church of ours in Jackson. And through that church, we're still serving. We run a food pantry at my church where we serve the needy of the community of Jackson. Although none of us live in Jackson, that's where our church is, and that's the community we serve. Anytime someone is in need, I have this overwhelming urge, and I sometimes wish I didn't, but I do. I've accepted it to help, to do whatever I can. Not to give a handout so much, but a hand up. They say you can give a man a fish he can eat for one day. You show him how to fish, he can eat forever. And that's what I believe in. I tell people that I work with that I will work as hard for you as you're willing to work. I had a business, a paving business for many years, and I taught a lot of guys what it was like to put forth the effort, an honest day's work for an honest day's wage. And I got to say this, most of my crew were young African-American men in my community. And one thing we had going for my company was that they could not say that I was getting on their case because they were black. And that is used sometimes, and we had one of the better paving companies around. And like I said, I've spent most of my life trying to help someone because it took me a while to accept the fact that that is what I'm supposed to be doing. You know, sometimes I get tired, don't want to do it, but I'm saying I got to do it. I have on my wall right above my computer a piece of scripture, basically what it says, to whom much is given, much is required. And God has given me a bunch. And so much is required. When I get tired, I get up and go a little bit further. My mom has imposed the country quit, like only myself, but although he was a view, he believed in judging a person on what they could do, the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And he afforded us an opportunity to do it. It was rough getting a decent job for an African American 50 years ago here, but the NAACP has helped secure jobs. For a short period of time, 71, 72, I worked for Ocean Inc. under Colonel Rob Tarver as a job developer, job counselor. Found out I did not like working inside, went back to paving. But I did work with Ocean Inc. for a while, and it was a good experience because we got jobs. We secured jobs for many African Americans that were able to do the jobs, that did have the qualifications to do the jobs, but were often denied the opportunity to do the jobs.